What really happened to the 12 apostles? Jesus had 12 apostles. You've probably heard how most of them died, crucified upside down, beheaded, skinned alive. But here's the question almost nobody asks. How much of that is actually in the Bible? And how much is just tradition that got repeated so many times it started to sound like fact? Today we're going through all 12, one at a time, and marking every claim as either scripture, something the biblical text actually says, or tradition, something that comes from later church writings, decades or centuries afterward. After the resurrection, the 11 remaining apostles scattered. Judas was gone. To restore the number 12, the early church chose a replacement named Matthias. That part is in Acts chapter 1. First, James, son of Zebedee. This is the one everybody forgets. But it's the only apostle death the Bible actually documents. King Herod had him executed by the sword in Jerusalem. That's it, one sentence in the book of Acts. No legend, no elaborate story, just a direct historical record. Now, Judas Iscariot. Here's something strange. The Bible gives us two different accounts of how he died. One says he hanged himself. Another says he fell in a field bought with the money he was paid to betray Jesus, and died there. Both are in Scripture. Neither is tradition. They're just two accounts that don't fully line up, and honest teaching means presenting both, instead of picking the tidier one. Peter is where tradition really takes over. Jesus does hint in the Gospel of John that Peter would die a death he didn't choose. That part's Scripture. But the famous image of Peter crucified upside down in Rome, that's not in the Bible at all. It comes from much later Christian writers, generations after the fact. Andrew's story is almost entirely tradition. Later legend places him preaching and dying on an X-shaped cross in Greece. Nothing in Scripture describes his death at all. John is the outlier. Tradition holds that he's the only apostle who died of natural causes in old age after a period of exile on the island of Patmos. No martyrdom story attached to him, which itself is worth noticing. Thomas has one of the stronger traditions, that he traveled all the way to India, and that Christian communities there still trace their roots back to him today. Not scripture, but a tradition with real historical staying power. Then there are 5 apostles where the record gets thin. Bartholomew, Philip, Matthew, Simon, and Thaddeus. Each has some tradition attached. Bartholomew to Armenia, Philip to Greece, but the sourcing is late, thin, or contradicts other traditions. Low confidence across the board. One more wrinkle. There's long-running scholarly debate over whether James the Just, who led the church in Jerusalem, is the same person as James, son of Alphaeus, one of the 12. It's genuinely unresolved. Historians disagree. And then there's Matthias, chosen to replace Judas in the very first chapter of Acts, and never mentioned again anywhere in the New Testament. He just disappears from the record entirely. So here's the real count. Of 12 apostles, exactly one death on James, son of Zebedee, is actually documented in Scripture. Everything else you've ever heard about how the apostles died is later church tradition. Some of it well supported, some of it barely held together. Knowing the difference is the whole point.